have lived in Prospect Heights since 2000. The neighborhood wasn't doing so great at the time, but with the presence of a museum, Prospect Park, and a public library, I figured this has got to be a good place to be. Now, with my 17 years living in Prospect Heights, I'm discovering all these new things. Through the research that we've done, I discovered that we're close to Prospect Park, but we almost were Prospect Park.
The original design of Prospect Park included the area we're sitting in right now. We're sitting in some place that was supposed to be part of Prospect Park, but never came to pass that way because the original landscape architect that was hired by the Brooklyn Parks Commission, a fellow named Veal, was also in the Army Corps of Engineers, and when the Civil War broke out, he was called into service.
Initially, there was an Egbert-Veal plan, which I think dated to 1861, which had a much larger footprint that was bifurcated by Flatbush Avenue. Egbert-Veal got called away to fight in the Civil War, and Prospect Park was given to Olmsted and Vaux.
And they brought in two guys named Olmsted and Vaux who had built a pretty nice park in Manhattan called Central Park. And Olmsted and Vaux looked at Vealey's design and said, we don't think you ought to have Flatbush Avenue running through the middle of this park. So we're not going to use any of this land here on the east side of Flatbush Avenue.
So they eliminated the areas of the Prospect Park plan that were east of Flatbush.
So now all of a sudden the city of Brooklyn had a big chunk of land on its hands, and it didn't know what to do with it. It had an idea that it would sell some of it for development, but because the land had been assembled under eminent domain, some of the former owners, who were farmers, decided to contest it being given away to developers. They were told it was going to be used for a park. It took a long time to work out those lawsuits, and so it wasn't until the early 20th century, really till 1909, that you started to have buildings finally get constructed on the area that's just north of Eastern Parkway.
There were some urban developments happen that changed the way development happened. So the idea that the subway could be extended into Brooklyn meant that developers saw a different way of developing these plots.
By that point, people now wanted to live in apartment buildings. So all the lots up there, which were originally small lots for row houses, were aggregated into big lots that you could build bigger apartment buildings in.
The first buildings were constructed around 1908, and the development carried on until 1929. So we have like around 20 years of development of apartment buildings.
The interesting thing about the Prospect Heights apartment house district is that this was a real cultural boulevard in Brooklyn that had a dense residential neighborhood developed right alongside it to encourage people from Manhattan to move to Brooklyn.
The city has an agency called the Landmarks Preservation Commission to regulate buildings of special historic or aesthetic value to the city, state, or nation.
The chances that the Lincoln Place people got the postcards are very small.
This is some of the stuff that we'll be distributing to elicit interest in the district.
It's just about 50-50 ownership buildings and rental buildings.
The wonderful thing about the Prospect Heights apartment house district is that it is an obvious historic district. Looking around in the area in Brooklyn, and in fact, looking around the area in the larger sense of New York City, it is up there with things like Riverside Drive, with places like Central Park West that create a sense of procession and a sense of classic order that's quite rare in New York City.
We'll have some progress to report. I think we have a call with the city.
We're trying to reach not only people who own apartments and co-op and condo buildings in the southeast part of the neighborhood, but we would need to reach the tenants as well, and especially need to reach the tenants so they understand what the benefits are with respect to historic designation on helping to stabilize the housing stock in the neighborhood.
You have a lot of families who live here, a lot of stakeholders who really believe their homes are worth preserving.
The neighborhood is changing fast. We find ourselves at a fork in the road right now. One pathway is preservation, where we can maintain not only the richness of architecture, but the richness, the diversity of the community that we have. Or we can go down the other path where we can see increases in height, we can see development that puts profit before people and basically destroys the human fabric of our neighborhood.